All right, let's dive in. This election, well, it left a lot of people scratching their heads, and we're going to try to unpack some of that today with some help from writer Jorge Majfud.
Yeah, he's got some really interesting ideas about what went on. And, he's been following these trends for a while.
He's been looking at this stuff for years and years, and it seems like, well, a lot of folks got this election wrong, like really wrong.
Big time. I mean, remember those polls?
Especially those big aggregators, 538. They had Harris winning by a landslide. A landslide. So what happened? Majfud, he uses this term media denialism, talking about the Gaza conflict.
It's like the mainstream media, I don't know if they were doing it on purpose or not, but they just didn't seem to grasp the impact that Gaza had on voters.
And not only that, Majfud, he actually criticizes the language the media was using.
Right. Like they avoided certain terms,
Gaza, for example.
Palestine.
Yeah, the even genocide. And it makes you wonder, if they're controlling the language, are they controlling the narrative?
Exactly. And if they're controlling the narrative, then it's no surprise those polls were so off.
Well, and here's something else, something that I think really adds to this whole thing. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, both very strong advocates for Palestinian rights, they won their re-elections by a huge margin.
Huge margin.
This is despite, the general swing towards the Republicans. What does that tell us?
Well, it tells us that what the media was saying maybe didn't reflect what voters were actually thinking and feeling.
Like they were missing something, right?
Totally. And this goes right to Majfud's point about the media being, well, a little out of touch with a lot of the voters. But, he takes it a step further. He says this disconnect, this is just a symptom of a bigger problem.
A much bigger problem, yeah.
A system that's basically rigged against the average person.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. He calls the U.S. electoral system deeply flawed, rooted in, a history of slavery, and now totally dominated by corporate interests. And this is hard to argue with when you think about some of the things these corporate bigwigs say, like, remember that quote from Larry Fink?
Oh, the CEO of BlackRock, yeah.
What did he say? It doesn't matter who wins, Harris or Trump, because both would be good for Wall Street.
Wow, right.
It's a pretty blunt statement.
Like, who's the system actually working for?
Exactly. And Majfud, he describes this system where corporate money is just flowing between these corporations, political parties, media outlets, and it creates this cycle.
This vicious cycle.
Where the real issues, the things that affect everyday people, they just get drowned out by, all the sensationalism and all this identity politics.
And this is where this whole idea of the manosphere comes in, this online world where they're pushing traditional masculinity, a lot of times with some pretty misogynistic views.
Yeah, have you heard of this?
Thanks.
It's getting a lot of attention lately.
And Majfud, he connects this right back to his point about identity politics.
All right, yeah.
Like this focus on us versus them, it's created this space for groups like this to flourish.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. And to be honest, a little disturbing. The Wall Street Journal, they ran an article suggesting that Barron Trump, Donald Trump's son, that he actually played a role in connecting his father to this manosphere.
Really?
Yeah. So it makes you think, how much influence did this group actually have?
That's a good question, and one we should definitely explore further. I mean, think about it. These online communities, they give people this sense of belonging, Especially people who feel like they're not being heard, like they don't fit in.
Yeah, it's like they find a place where they feel understood.
Exactly. And that can be really powerful. But it also means that even if these groups are based on, bad information or harmful ideas, they can still have a real impact out in the world. It makes you wonder about the role of the internet, right? Like, how much is it shaping our politics?
This is something Majfud gets into. It's really fascinating. He says, America, we have this tendency to prioritize belief over facts.
Like, we'd rather believe something than actually look at the evidence.
Right. And he talks about how, especially in some religious circles, there's this idea of replacing reality with what you want to believe.
It's like that saying, seeing is believing. They flipped it around.
It's believing is seeing now.
Exactly. And Majfud's argument is that this mindset, it's affecting everything. It's how we approach politics, how we interact with the media, even how we treat each other.
And then you add in, the way these algorithms work on social media. It's kind of scary.
They're designed to feed us more of what we already believe.
They create these echo chambers where you only see stuff that confirms what you already think.
It's like a cycle of misinformation, and it just keeps getting worse. And, Majfud says this makes us easy targets for propaganda.
Which brings us back to the manosphere.
Right. They thrive on these shared beliefs, a lot of anger, a lot of resentment.
A lot of resentment towards women, towards feminism.
Anything that challenges their view of what it means to be a man.
And, it's easy to say, oh, these are just fringe groups. They don't really matter. But we can't ignore that some of their ideas, they're starting to seep into the mainstream.
And I think the Wall Street Journal article about Barron Trump, that's a perfect example.
Even if the claims aren't true, it raises some important questions.
Like, how much influence do these online groups really have? And what happens when their ideas start to spread? Where does that lead us as a society?
It's pretty unsettling when you think about it. Like, are we moving toward this kind of emotionally driven politics where feelings matter more than facts? So we've got these inaccurate polls, the media missing the mark, corporate money influencing everything, and these online groups gaining traction. It's a lot. Where do we even start to address all this?
Majfud, he suggests we need to have deeper conversations that go beyond the surface level stuff and get to the root of what's dividing us.
Like, instead of getting caught up in all the outrage, we need to ask ourselves, what are the underlying issues here? What are the things that we actually agree on, the things that could bring us together instead of pushing us apart?
Right. It's about moving past those labels, left versus right, conservative versus liberal, and recognizing that at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We all want a good future for ourselves, for our kids, for the planet.
And maybe, just maybe, if we can start from that place of shared humanity, we can start to have those tough conversations, the ones that challenge us, that make us question our own assumptions and face some uncomfortable truths.
It's not going to be easy, but if we want to create a better world, a fairer world, a more sustainable world, it's absolutely necessary. And that's what I find so powerful about Majfud's analysis. It's not just criticism, it's a call to action.
He's telling us to wake up, to step outside of our echo chambers and get to work, to build a better future. And it's not going to be pretty all the time. It's going to be messy and challenging.
But we can all do it, no matter what our political beliefs are. It starts with each and every one of us.
This deep dive has really given us a lot to think about. And it's clear that the answers aren't simple. But by understanding these bigger issues, by having these tough conversations, by working together, we can start to move in a new direction.
A direction that leads to a brighter future, a fairer future, a more equitable future.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep asking those questions, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.